Hi there, Adam Eason here. Here for another kind of listening video, I guess. Last week I did a trial reaction video to Louis Farrank's Impromptu. After I posted it, though, something was kind of niggling at my brain in terms of copyright and permissions and fair use, and I was really beginning to understand that I didn't approach that video properly. So currently it is private, and I am trying to get in contact with the pianist who performed it and am attempting to obtain permissions for that. Hopefully, I can get in touch with them in a reasonable fashion. In today's video, I have my coffee and I also have Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. The music is his African Dances, written in 1904. Coleridge-Taylor is a name I think he's starting to make a bit of a resurgence. In his time, he was a composer and conductor, and kind of this late romantic musician. He was born in 1875. He died in 1912. His mother, Alice Hare Martin, was an Englishwoman, and his father, Dr. Daniel Peter Hughes Taylor, was a Creole Sierra Leonean. And his father was a descendant of some freed slave peoples who were freed by the British during the American Revolution. And so the British freed these people. They took them to Nova Scotia first. And then there's a group of the freed people who, they were facing racism and problems there too. So they went over to Sierra Leone, excuse me, and settled there. And that's kind of a brief Cliff's Note version of what happened. It's pretty complex. It happened over a long period of time, and yeah, it's a weird moment in history that we just in the United States never talk about. We never talk about, hey, during the American Revolution, the British actually freed slaves and um, tried to settle them elsewhere. The African dances are a little bit uh, not obviously African. I think I've done some digging and can't really find which dances Coleridge Taylor had in mind for these four pieces. Um, but, clearly, I mean, he was interested in his African heritage. When he visited the States, he also met like W.E.B. Du Bois. He sat as a delegate on, let me double check, make sure I get it right. Sat as a delegate on the first Pan African Conference. This is in 1900. Uh, Basically, a big conference. They were um, speaking against racism. They were advocating for the independence of European colonies in Africa and elsewhere, um, to be freed of that colonization. So, uh, Coleridge Taylor, you know, he was doing his work to try and figure out like how he fit on this kind of global scale. Um, and these African dances are the result of some of that thinking, how to translate that into music. So that's a bit of the background. Let's go ahead and get started. I have the score here. This is available on IMSLP. It says it's not available in public domain in Europe. Should be public domain in the States. I didn't see any other red flags about other countries, like Australia. So let's give a listen. I have listened to this already. So I have my ear open for some spots to talk about, but we're just going to start right from the beginning and talk about some cool bits. Here we go. Alrighty, so um, honestly, when I first heard this, I was like, "This sounds like a Chopin mazurka, kind of." And I mean, you can look up Chopin mazurkas yourself to kind of see some of the rhythmic similarities. I think some of the big differences, Chopin's mazurkas tend to be much more clearly on the side of the waltz and have that chop 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 feeling. We do have some of that coming up in the next melody, but for this first melody, the rhythmic pattern is a little bit less clear. He's building things more in uh, groups of two bars and having the rhythm. It's called a hemiola. So when we're counting rhythm in European music, we count for 3/4 time, 3 beats. So 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 1 2 3. In this case, the way he is writing the melody along with the harmony, he's having this big rhythm cross over the bar so that it feels more like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and creating this larger 2 bar rhythm as opposed to the single bar rhythm of the waltz 1 2 3 1 2 3. I also really appreciated right at the end of the clip that I posted here, he had this moment where he's set up this long note, right? And then just adding some extra colorful chords underneath it to prolong that moment before we get into the next melody. It's a cool little thing without getting too much into the music theory details for my lay people and kind of starting to get glassy eyed over on that side of things. It's just a nice little prolongation uh, of this last note. So let's continue on. All right. Got a little past where I wanted to stop there, but again, here we have a more clear waltz feeling. It's a slow waltz, but still has that 1 2 3, and he's adding an extra emphasis on the second beat. So waltzes we think of 1 2 3 1 2 3, and instead Coleridge-Taylor is asking for 1 2 3 1 2 3. I kind of think that this um, rhythmic emphasis away from beat one is part of his thinking about the African influence. European music is pretty downbeat centric. If you watched or read my interview with my Uruguayan friend Washington Plata, we had a short discussion about that, where uh, European music is kind of 1 2 1 2 1 2, as opposed to African or Latin American music 1 2 1 2 1 2, and it gives it a perceptible difference in rhythm. The melody itself, I mean, Coleridge-Taylor writes these really pretty expansive melodies um, that cover a long period of time. He doesn't uh, necessarily, however, work in um, like, I don't know, Brucknerian terms, um, where there are these just kind of repeated chunks, or um, like maybe Beethoven, where you have a single obsessive motive. He works in larger units than that, but you can still kind of hear um, so he finds ways of taking something that's the same, so we have the same rhythm, bam ba 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 ba, bam ba 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 ba. But each time it comes back, he takes it in a different direction. So sometimes he comes up, sometimes he comes down, sometimes he aims for a different note. So it's uh, this nice mix of things that are the same and things that are different. And he has a lot of different approaches to um, how he harmonizes this as well. So you're never quite hearing the same thing twice. You kind of are, but it keeps on like shifting through this kaleidoscopic pattern of chords and tones and melodic directions. All right, I'm going to back up a little bit and get into the next segment. And then he brings back that figure from the beginning here much more dramatically than when we first heard it. Um, this segment where it kind of became, it says più animato, so a little bit more animated, a little bit more lively, um, more playful, definitely. He spends some time kind of passing this figure back and forth between the violin and the piano. There's a little bit of this call and response um, technique that's involved. And he spends just a little bit of time there and then sneaks back to più tranquillo, more tranquil, more placid, more that earlier feeling. So this is really nice. It's something that happens in, I think, especially in Mozart, where Mozart will just take this sudden color change, this sudden mood change, and then just flip right back like nothing happened. Um, and it's, as a composer, that's very hard to do in a way that feels natural. Um, so, this is one of those moments, kind of connoisseur moments. Like, I think if you're just average Joe listener, you're like, oh, this is so pretty, yay. But if you're paying attention to details uh, kind of a deeper level, he's got these little cool moments for that kind of listener as well, where it's just like, whoa, that was unexpected, but also still flowed well. Um, Harmonically, he's taken us pretty far from where we started. Um, to kind of give a quick overview, when we talk about harmony in European music, usually it's centered around a particular scale. So most of the European scales are 7 notes. You might know do, a deer, a female deer, ba da 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 da. Right? In this case, he does use that scale. He also uses a different scale. Ba da 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 da. There's some other little colorful um, additions he makes outside of those scales. Um, and the scales will be centered on one pitch. So for the first minute or so, we've been centered on G. And in what's called a modulation, a composer will find a way to begin to shift away from the emphasis on those 7 pitches, the 7 pitches that you started with, to a different collection of 7 pitches. And in this case, he's taken us to a collection of pitches centered around, it's a little ambiguous, but probably E flat. And, it's a very clear color difference when you get there. I'll back up and point it out so that you can hear it again. Excuse me, I did not back up far enough. Let's try that one more time. Right there. Right there at that moment that I pointed out, there's a very nice color change. After this, he takes us kind of through those 2 melodies again. He adds some variation. There are some nice virtuosic moments. He actually wrote this for his friend John Saunders, who is a wonderful violinist of that time. And what I really appreciate about this piece is there's a lot of technically impressive moments that are not necessarily overbearing, and he does a nice job of balancing that, uh, like sounding impressive but not necessarily like really breaking the violinist's fingers. He has a set of variations for cello and piano that are similar. Sounds really cool, very natural on the instrument, doesn't really is just fun to play. Um, there are 3 other dances as well in this set. I highly recommend them to my violinist friends. They're beautiful. They're a lot of really cool moments to show off. They work as encore pieces. As a set, it works as a kind of sonata or a sonatina, maybe. And it's just a breath of fresh air, I think. If you're looking for something to get out of the sort of prescribed musical canon, you've played Beethoven, Brahms, and Bach until your brain falls out. Here's something different to kind of, offer something new. All right, coming up on 20 minutes. That's, I think, plenty of time. for an introduction to this. Again, this is Samuel Coleridge-Taylor chamber music released by Centaur Records. It's available on Spotify. It's also on YouTube. I'll include those links in the description below. If you enjoyed this, found it informative, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions of music I should check out in the future for these kinds of guided tours, let me know and I will take a peek. All right, thank you everybody, and you have a good week.